2020 was a record-breaking year for the U.S., but not in a good way. There were 22 recorded climate disasters, 13 hurricanes, 7 cyclones, 1 major drought, and 1 major wildfire. Just 20 years earlier, the average number of severe weather events was only around 6 per year. While 20 years may seem like a lot of time, in the lifespan of Earth, it's very short. So why has the number of climate disasters increased so much, so quickly? The answer has to do with climate change. Climate change is a long-term shift in average weather patterns across the globe. Within certain ranges, climate change is natural. For example, the Earth's temperature has risen and fallen in stable cycles throughout its history. But now, the Earth's climate is changing faster and more dramatically than at any point in recorded history. Scientists have shown that these changes are a result of human activity. Let's look at the impact of human activities on the Earth's climate and its consequences. Throughout most of our history, humans have burned fossil fuels like coal and oil for heat, warmth, and energy. Burning these fuels releases gases, known as greenhouse gases, that trap heat in the Earth's atmosphere. When these gases build up, they stop the heat from escaping into space like a greenhouse. Deforestation and large-scale farming make the greenhouse effect worse. These activities clear trees and plants that naturally help to remove these gases from the atmosphere. The trapped heat causes the Earth's surface temperature to rise, which can lead to extreme changes in climate and severe weather events. Unfortunately, vulnerable communities suffer the most from the consequences of climate change. For example, let's look at how heat waves impact vulnerable communities in large cities. As the Earth's surface heats up, tall buildings and asphalt absorb the heat and prevent it from rising into the atmosphere. As a result, large amounts of heat are trapped in one area. This is known as an urban heat island. Heat islands experience higher temperatures than the surrounding areas and contribute to heat waves in large cities. These heat waves affect some communities more than others. A study by the city of New York found that Black residents were over twice as likely to die from heat-related illnesses than white residents. Why is this the case? The answer has to do with discriminatory housing policies from the past and present. Research has found that previously red-lined areas experience more heat waves and flooding than other areas. A red-lined area is one that the federal government discouraged investing in, and whose residents have had fewer financial opportunities. Historically, the government red-lined areas where predominantly Black and Hispanic communities lived. This widened the racial wealth gap, which made it difficult for communities to improve these areas or move out of them. Historically red-lined areas generally have older, less stable buildings and infrastructure, which makes them more vulnerable to severe weather. Not only are they more vulnerable, but governments often provide little direct financial support for residents to rebuild after a disaster. In fact, research shows that lower-income areas generally receive less funding from government relief organizations. This happens despite the fact that historically red-lined communities often don't have the resources to rebuild their homes and neighborhoods themselves. So what does this mean for our future? Science has shown that the consequences of climate change are only getting worse. They affect every single human on the planet in one way or another, but because of historical inequalities, they affect vulnerable communities the most. Not only do we need to change the systems and activities that contribute to climate change, but we also need to address the inequalities that put certain communities at greater risk.